The main protagonist of the story has two identities. Superficially, he is a poor student in the eyes of his classmates, but secretly he is a super fighter, saving the kidnapped school beauty. Even the powerful special forces are no match for him. Though very strong, he does not want to reveal his identity to be a superhero or a big devil. Instead, he enjoys being unnoticed like a shadow, hiding in the darkness to explore the limits of human power. Later, he travels to the other world as he wished. He rules the Shadow Garden, composed of a group of beauties, becoming the leader of the shadow hidden in the darkness. The story begins with Princess Akane being woken up by the alarm clock. She goes to take a hot bath and looks at herself in the mirror with a serious expression, as if she is hiding some secrets. After being taken to school by the driver, Akane immediately puts on a smile. As the most popular girl in school, she draws everyone's attention except for her deskmate, Shadow, who is our main protagonist. He is a poor student in others' eyes, but just such a paltry one gives no interest in the prettiest girl Akane. They've been deskmates for 3 months, but he doesn't even remember her name. Akane tells Shadow her name over and over again, but Shadow never calls her name correctly. Since Shadow always ignores her, Akane suspects that he must have a huge secret that takes up all his attention, and that's why he gives no concern to the most popular girl in school. Though Akane is a bit upset about it, she never shows her true emotions in public. With a distinguished family background and an image-oriented identity as an actress, Akane always keeps a smile on her face whether she is happy or not, trying to make herself an easygoing good student. However, peaceful life doesn't last long. One day after school, Akane finds her driver neither shows up nor answers the phone call, so she decides to walk home alone. When she passes by a deserted road, she encounters a strong man who doesn't seem like a good one. She immediately walks away but gets blocked by the man's companion. Before she faints in struggling, she seems to see her deskmate, Shadow. By the time Akane wakes up, she has been locked up. The strong man and his accomplice killed her driver and kidnapped her. The thugs seem to do it for money, but actually they are hired to take revenge on Akane's father. At this moment, Shadow is outside the door. This ordinary student takes out his backpack, which contains his disguises to hide his identity. The strong man's accomplice casts greedy eyes on the pretty girl Akane. As he is about to do something, Shadow shows up with a headgear to cover his face. The air around him becomes terrifying. Shadow knocks off the opponent's pistol, and after a set of consecutive attacks, he wins easily. Next, it is the turn of the strong man. The thug throws away his pistol even though he has seen Shadow's strength, which means he is very confident in his own. As a veteran, the strong man is much more difficult to deal with, hurting Shadow in his first move. But the injury doesn't frighten Shadow. Instead, he gets excited because he hasn't met a tough opponent for a long time. The situation is immediately reversed as Shadow gets serious. The strong man's arm is badly injured, so he can only defend himself without being able to make any counterattack. His arrogant attitude just disappeared, and he desperately tries to pick up the pistol, which is his last chance. But Shadow's movements are amazingly fast, with a set of which he defeats the strong man completely. Seeing Shadow approaching, Akane is very scared that the man may kill her as well. Luckily, he just cuts the rope for her to not reveal his identity. Shadow then hides, wondering if he can find stronger opponents somewhere else. After that, Akane's father pulls strings to suppress the kidnapping because he doesn't want her daughter to be exposed to the public because of such an event, and the police never figure out who saved Akane. When Akane returns to school, Shadow calls her name correctly, which surprises Akane. But what she doesn't expect is that this is the last time they see each other. Soon after, a traffic accident is broadcast on TV, and the deceased turns out to be our protagonist, Shadow. What follows is a memory of Shadow. He was different from other children when he was little, when everyone dreamed of becoming a superhero or even an evil villain. Shadow's dream was to become an unnoticed but powerful man. But when he grows up, Shadow is disappointed to find that no matter how strong he is, he can't have the supernatural power like the heroes in novels. Even if he defeats a heavily armed army, he can't defend against a nuclear bomb. At the last moment, when Shadow's consciousness dissipates, he erupts with a cry of reluctance in his heart. He wants to surpass the limits of human power to become the strongest. Back to the present time. After Shadow dies in a car accident, he gets reincarnated as a newborn baby. His mother is very gentle while his father is a bald baron. It seems Shadow gets a good script in this world. In a noble family, he doesn't have to worry about starving or being attacked, which allows him to discover the world and find the most suitable way to become stronger. Shadow's family has a lineage of spellsword, and there is always a powerful spellsword in every generation. For example, Shadow's sister, Claire, shows amazing talents. In fact, Shadow is even more talented than his sister, but he likes to do great things in secret. So when Claire attracts everyone's attention, Shadow disguises himself as the ordinary. At the age of 10, Shadow is already very strong. He often goes out at night to hunt those cruel bandits, who though have guns and superior numbers, still get defeated by Shadow within a few moves. Shadow's weapons and defensive equipment have the characteristics of the slime, which can not only attack enemies in a distance with various forms, but also transform in defense. General bandits can only bully ordinary people, and are no match for genius Shadow, who can eliminate a whole bandit team in 10 minutes or so. Since the victims have been killed by the bandits, the properties then belong to Shadow. When Shadow is counting his harvest tonight, he accidentally finds a pile of rotting flesh. Shadow feels the strange magic fluctuations on the flesh, and realizes this is probably a demon-possessed body. It's said the one who gets possessed by the demon will gradually become rotting flesh. Shadow starts secret research on it for a month and finally lifts the curse, turning the rotting flesh into its true form, a blonde-haired elven girl. That's when Shadow comes up with an idea. He has been wanting to form his secret power, and the elven girl is his first recruiting target. He falsely claims that the demon-possessed body is actually a hoax. The truth comes from the legend where 3 heroes defeated the demon Diabolos and saved the world, while Diabolos cursed the heroes before he died that their descendants would all become rotting flesh. Diabolos' followers deliberately spread rumors that those who turned into rotting flesh were demon-possessed, so that the world would expel and imprison these heroes' descendants. Therefore, when the followers try to resurrect Diabolos, no hero's descendants will come to ruin it. Shadow can tell the elven girl is burning with the longing for revenge. He seizes the opportunity to name her Alpha, promising to form an army to fight against the cult of Diabolos. Alpha has been brainwashed by Shadow, swearing that she will devote all her life to Shadow. In fact, what Shadow said was all made up. He just wants to form his forces to fight against those powerful but evil organizations. To his surprise, Alpha attaches much attention to the revenge and starts to think about where to make money and recruit. 3 years later, Shadow still disguises himself as an ordinary one in front of his family. In the competition with Claire, Shadow thinks her movements are too slow, for which he tries to teach his sister some tips without being noticed by others. Claire feels strange that every time she competes with her weaker brother, her combat skills will get improved. Claire is 15 years old this year, and it's time for her to go study at the Spellsword School in the capital. But before setting out, Claire is missing. Her room is in chaos, which proves there was once a fierce fight happening. Shadow soon starts his rescue, and the maid beside him reveals her real form. She is named Beta, Shadow's subordinate recruited by Alpha. In the past 3 years, Alpha helped Shadow recruit 6 powerful subordinates, plus Alpha herself known as the Shadow 7. They suspect it was the cult of Diabolos that kidnapped Claire because the cult thinks Claire is one of the descendants of the heroes, which bothers Shadow. It seems Shadow 7 really take his lies seriously, and they consider every evil person the member of the cult of Diabolos. Shadow quickly switches the topic and orders Beta to get others gathered to look for Claire. He casually throws a dart into the map, which misleads Beta to think Shadow throws the dart to instruct them to where Claire is locked. Beta admires Shadow's scouting ability. As night falls, the kidnapper is interrogating Claire, who he determines is also a demon-possessed person, and the kidnapper wants to find out why Claire has not yet become rotting flesh. When he accidentally learns that Claire's strength improves every time she competes with her brother, he starts to suspect Shadow should be the one who stops Claire from rotting. Claire is worried that the kidnappers will strike at her brother, and tries to stop them though she is injured. But she is no match for the kidnapper and gets punched to the ground. Just then, the kidnapper's companion brings bad news that 7 powerful girls broke in, whose strength is comparable to the elite soldiers, and the guards are no match. When the kidnapper rushes out to check, his companions have all been slain. Shadow 7 tell the kidnapper that they are here to defeat the plot of the cult of Diabolos. Shadow's made-up story is unexpectedly of great concern to the kidnapper, who fights with Shadow 7 while asking them where they knew it from. After a few rounds, the kidnapper finds that he is no match for Shadow 7, so he takes a pill that makes him stronger. He pretends to launch a strong attack to distract Shadow 7's attention, seizing the opportunity to flee. The kidnapper thinks he is finally safe, but happens to meet Shadow, who is lost. The kidnapper is actually very powerful, with stronger magic power than Alpha, but who he duels with is Shadow, the one with immense talents. So in the end, the kidnapper loses. The kidnapper eventually gets killed, and his pocket watch with a photo of his daughter is also taken by Shadow. After that, Claire returns home. As she gets recovered, she sets out to the capital for her studies. To Shadow's surprise, Shadow 7 claimed to leave as well for expanding their organization to fight against Diabolos, but Shadow thinks it may be their excuse to leave, since they've grown up to figure out the cult of Diabolos is made up and it's time to stop the childish game. But it doesn't affect Shadow that much. He comes to the capital of the kingdom alone and continues pretending to be ordinary. In his past life as an Earthling, he didn't have superpowers. Now he gets to be reborn in this world with sword skills and magic. He will try his best to achieve the dream hidden in his heart, even just by himself. He wants to be the eminence in Shadow, who can be low profile but has the power to control the whole world. Shadow's disguise is very successful. At the age of 15 he is promoted to the same Midgar Academy as his sister. Because of his mediocre performance, he is assigned to a rundown apartment far from the city center. To not be late, he has to catch the train to school every day. 7 months have passed since Shadow got into the academy, where he met 2 new friends. They made a bet on the school exam, and Shadow, who lost the game, is punished for confessing his love to Princess Alexia. Alexia is so popular at school that there are a lot of excellent boys confessing love to her but getting rejected every day. Shadow isn't worried about getting rejected at all. He will go confessing nervously with his body shivering and cry loud after being rejected. That's how a typical background student will act like. To Shadow's surprise, Alexia turns out to accept his love, which also shocked his 2 friends who are hiding nearby. Therefore, Shadow, though wanting to keep low-key, suddenly becomes the most high-profile student in school. He draws everyone's attention and arises a discussion wherever he goes. The 2 students who encouraged Shadow to confess are now very regretful, as they always feel superior to Shadow and they believe they would succeed if it were them who approached Alexia. At this time, Alexia sits next to Shadow, bringing a lot of delicious food. Shadow wants Alexia to hate and break up with him, so he deliberately acts like a yokel, greedily grabbing the food. However, it doesn't alienate Alexia from Shadow. Instead, she proposes to have classes with him this afternoon. Because of Alexia's recommendation, Shadow is transferred from the low-level fencing class to the elite class, where the teacher, Xenon, is a royal fencing master, and every student works harder than those in the low-level classes. During the class, instead of chit-chat noise, there is only the sound of swords clashing with swords. Shadow is surprised to find when he practices with Alexia that they have similar fencing skills. They both focus on the base of the sword instead of fancy moves. Alexia has a genius sister Iris who masters fancy fencing skills, which leads to Alexia's rating being consistently inferior to Iris's. The conversation between Alexia and Xenon after class reveals their relationship, and it turns out that Xenon is Alexia's fiancé candidate. Alexia then tells Shadow about her plan. She accepted Shadow and became his girlfriend because she wanted to stop those suitors from harassing her. Also, Shadow seems to have mediocre qualifications and ordinary background, so she can be bossing him easily. The next 2 points Alexia mentions make Shadow unable to reject her. Firstly, she has known from the 2 students that Shadow's confessing to her was his punishment after losing the bet. If she exposes it, Shadow will be in trouble. Besides, Alexia is willing to hire Shadow with decent payment, while Shadow also wants to make money to start his organization. Therefore, he takes the job. The next few days, Alexia always holds Shadow wherever they go, but Xenon isn't jealous at all. Alexia acts more like a lady in public while showing her childish personality when she is with Shadow, complaining that Xenon hasn't given up on her. Therefore, Alexia starts hanging out around the city with Shadow, intending to be seen by more people to cause a greater impact on Xenon. Shadow can't figure out why Alexia doesn't accept Xenon, who is obviously excellent in every way. At this point, Alexia says the reason why she hates Xenon is that he is pretending to be perfect while everyone should have some flaws. One day after school, Alexia and Shadow break out into a heated argument. Alexia talks about the ordinary sword style that she and Shadow use, which she actually loathes very much. If isn't for her talent limitation, she wants to perform the magnificent genius sword art like her sister Iris. Shadow tries to enlighten Alexia that she should just be herself instead of caring too much about others' opinions, which provokes her. When she lost to her sister Iris, that's how Iris comforted her, but it hurt Alexia's self-esteem. Shadow tells Alexia that he cares about neither the genius swordplay nor the disaster causing heavy casualties that attracts public attention. He only cares about mastering the basics of the sword skills, while his subtext is that he pursues a low-profile but powerful life which is just like basic swordsmanship. Alexia obviously doesn't get it, and she was enraged by the argument, deciding to end the relationship with Shadow. Shadow is fine with it, but the two students are annoying. They keep throwing questions like if Shadow is sad or not, and what has he done with Alexia as her boyfriend. Just when they are walking to the gate, they are blocked by Xenon, whose words shock and frighten them. It turns out that Alexia hasn't been back to her dorm since yesterday, and Shadow has become a suspect in kidnapping her because they had been together yesterday. Shadow meekly kneels down, noticing that he and his two classmates have been surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. Meanwhile, Princess Alexia wakes up from a coma and is fitted with a magic shackles. Alexia sees a monster imprisoned in the next cell, and the monster doesn't seem to be willing to be seen like this by Alexia, turning his head to avoid the princess's sight. At this time, a researcher shows up. This crazy man is responsible for watching over Alexia. His neurotic words reveal a piece of important information that Alexia's royal blood can be used in the research of resurrecting the demon Diabolos. The researcher draws several tubes of Alexia's blood, and he keeps talking to himself in a frenzy, complaining about his master for sabotaging his research, which makes him even more furious. So he begins to vent on the monster in the cell. Alexia can't bear to see the monster suffering, calling the researcher back to draw her blood. The researcher then forces Alexia to eat because the longer she lives, the more blood she can provide. The monster silently watches it, with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, poor Shadow is mistaken as the kidnapper, being brutally interrogated by the knights. But Shadow is neither afraid nor angry. Instead, he enjoys playing the coward. Shadow cries and begs for mercy, completely disguising himself as an ordinary person. Several days pass by. Xenon reports the results of the interrogation to Alexia's sister Iris. Shadow knows nothing and the strength he shows is too weak to beat Alexia, so they both agree that Shadow is most likely not the kidnapper. But Iris is so vigilant that she sends the knights to follow Shadow after releasing him. At this time, a quarrel in the school attracts Iris's attention. Through the window, she sees Shadow's sister Claire trying to defend her brother, claiming that her brother will never kidnap the princess, and she's gonna duel with the knights who interrogate Shadow. Other students try hard to stop her. Iris can't help thinking of how close she was with her sister Alexia, who then gradually distanced from her. Meanwhile, Alexia is very weak, because the researcher has been drawing blood from her but only giving her some non-nutritious rice. Shadow is no better than her. He is thrown out by the knights and covered in scars. On the way back to his dormitory, Shadow senses someone spying on him. Just then, a mysterious girl shows up to help him solve the stalker. Soon the mysterious girl appears in Shadow's dormitory. She turns out to be the leader of Shadow 7. Alpha, seeing Shadow is hungry, she brings him a burger and watches him eating with strong affection. Alpha tells Shadow that their organization has expanded a lot and is trying to catch up with the cult of Diabolos. Shadow thinks Alpha is just being kind to play the game of kindness fighting with evilness, never expecting the cult of Diabolos made up by him does exist, but he enjoys playing as a dark hero, casually asking about the recent achievements of the organization. Alpha tells Shadow that the Knights and the cult of Diabolos are closely concerned with each other. Who might be the real kidnapper? They are now drawing Alexia's blood to plot a huge conspiracy. Before leaving, Alpha asks Shadow if he wants to kill the two knights who interrogated him. Shadow decides to let them go for the time being, because others can easily suspect that he is the criminal who takes revenge on the interrogators. A few more days with hidden turbulence pass by. Shadow quietly gets rid of the new stalker. With the decent money he made from Alexia, Shadow has been buying antiques to set up his secret stronghold whenever he has time. Just then, a hot girl sneaks into the stronghold, who turns out to be the elf girl Beta, ranking second in Shadow 7. She has always admired Shadow and reveals to him that they've gathered hundreds of people in the royal capital, ready to attack the various strongholds of the cult of Diabolos at the same time. Shadow is shocked, thinking that these people are all actors hired by his companions. In fact, they are all elites carefully recruited by Shadow 7, and this will also be the first large-scale external battle organized by them, in which all members of Shadow 7 will join. Shadow interrupts Beta, saying that he will not miss such an exciting game and taking the initiative to attack. The members of the cult of Diabolos who have been undercover in the nights don't even know they are about to die, throwing Alexia's shoes over to frame Shadow for kidnapping when Shadow shows up again. At this moment, two corpses appear in front of them, which turn out to be the stalkers who spied on Shadow. He takes the advantage of the distraction of the knights to launch an attack. The two knights are the ones who tortured Shadow when interrogating him, and it's their retribution that they died in Shadow's hand. Meanwhile, Shadow 7 launch an attack on the cult of Diabolos, and the royal capital is completely thrown into chaos. The researcher gets furious because he realizes that he is about to be exposed, and he has no time to do more experiments. He then directly injects Alexia's blood into the monster's body, which immediately gets enlarged. The monster soon kills the researcher. After he cuts off the magical locking device on Alexia, the monster drills out through the underground. Alexia, who has regained her freedom, meets Xenon, and Xenon is exactly the real criminal who led the kidnapping. He intends to use the research result of the royal blood to exchange for benefits to become one of the 12 knights of the cult of Diabolos. Alexia is so upset that she abandons the basic sword skills she is familiar with, trying to defeat Xenon with the more lethal genius sword skill. However, there is a huge strength gap between her and Xenon, who knocks Alexia out with little effort. At this desperate moment, Shadow shows up. A fierce battle is about to begin. Elsewhere, the enlarged monster is besieged, but neither the muskets in the hands of the soldiers nor the swords in the hands of the knights can defeat the monsters. What's worse, the monster not only became larger, but also gained a powerful regeneration ability. Princess Iris also joins the battle, and her strength ranks very high in the kingdom, which finally makes the monster fall to the downside. She unleashes a sword of genius that combines speed and destruction, hoping to kill the monster completely before its regeneration. Just then, Shadow's subordinate, Alpha, stops Iris. She shows a far more powerful attack than Iris, killing the monster with just one attack. When the monster dies, it turns back to its human maiden form. A photo of a girl and her father is dropped on the ground, while the girl's father turns out to be the man who kidnapped Shadow's sister. Before leaving, Alpha tells Iris that she belongs to the Shadow Garden. Iris never expected that such a powerful organization would be born in the kingdom without her realizing it. Now it's Shadow's turn. The master of Shadow Garden disguises himself when shows up in front of Xenon and Alexia, neither of whom recognizes the mysterious person with a strong aura as the weak Shadow in the school. Confident in his strength, Xenon takes the initiative to attack Shadow, but he doesn't win after fighting several rounds. The proud Xenon has never thought of losing, and he doesn't even realize that Shadow is just simply defending the whole time. Before Xenon shows more strength, Shadow has lost patience and taunts Xenon with words, which irritates Xenon to make his strongest move. Thus they fall into a fierce battle again. Meanwhile, Alexia finds that the mysterious man has resisted Xenon's attack with only basic swordsmanship. Alexia was once frustrated because her basic swordplay was not comparable to Iris's innate talent, but now she seems to regain her confidence. The battle between Shadow and Xenon also reaches a result. Shadow defeats Xenon's gorgeous swordsmanship with his ordinary swordplay. Xenon asks who Shadow is, and Shadow tells Xenon that he is from the Shadow Garden that specializes in hunting members of the Diabolos cult. This is the first time Alexia has heard about the Shadow Garden and the cult. That's when Xenon makes a final struggle, taking a strength-boosting drug. After a painful wail, he completes his transformation like how Son Goku transforms into Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball. The drug has greatly improved Xenon's strength and confidence, and he is sure that he will win this battle. Soon Xenon launches a more lethal attack with his body glowing a blinding red, which makes Alexia unable to see the details of the battle. Just then, the exciting moment finally comes, as Shadow easily breaks Xenon's attack with his magic glowing purple. Xenon is shocked to find that Shadow's magic power is at least 10 times stronger than his. Shadow tells Xenon about his hard-earned insights. In Shadow's original world, no matter how hard he practiced, it was impossible to block the exploding nuclear bomb with his physical body. So he has been telling himself that if he doesn't want to be killed by a nuclear bomb, he must make himself as strong as a nuclear bomb. Before killing Xenon, Shadow says the last words to him, "I am a nuclear bomb." A huge explosion then directly breaks through the ground, illuminating the darkness with blinding light. Shadow 7 on a mission feel the strength of the leader Shadow, having only loyalty, adoration, and affection for him. Looking at the crater created by the explosion, Alexia is shortly distracted. She then picks up the sword on the ground, along with Alexia's confidence. Just then, Iris finds Alexia and hugs her. At this moment, Alexia doesn't alienate Iris, though her strength may still be not comparable to Iris. After the turmoil, the days return to normal. Alexia tells Shadow that she likes basic swordplay now, and she would change her attitude because she witnessed the power of the mysterious man. Alexia believes that one day her basic swordplay will also usher in a transformation. After that, Alexia gets blushed and asks if Shadow is willing to have a formal relationship with her. As Shadow rejects her, he is slashed by Alexia's sword. Seriously injured, Shadow runs into a girl holding a book when he leaves school. According to the loving filter, we can predict that they may fall in love soon. Meanwhile, girls of Shadow 7 gather for a meeting, and they are all praising Shadow's strength. Shadow 7's long-term plan is to investigate the cult of Diabolos to find their stronghold and completely eliminate it. However, they have a more urgent problem to solve now. A group of liars dare to claim to be the Shadow Garden in public, which angers Shadow 7, so they decide to find out about this group of scammers first. At the same time, Iris gathers her most trusted knights because she wants to set up a new investigation department to investigate in depth the origin of the cult of Diabolos and the Shadow Garden. Not long after, some serial killers appear in the royal capital. They kill people around while pretending to be the Shadow Garden created by Shadow, which causes the atmosphere in the royal capital to be tense, and everyone is afraid that they will become the next victim. However, the tension only spreads in ordinary civilians. Many teachers and students from the school Shadow attends are quite powerful, and they never worry about criminals breaking in and killing, so they still live a noisy but happy life as usual. In contrast, the Princess Iris is under pressure. She gathers her sister Alexia, the school's vice headmaster Ruslan, and Ruslan's adopted daughter Sherry, because there's a new discovery in Alexia's abduction case. A cross-shaped artifact was found at the scene, and Iris hears that Sherry is very knowledgeable and wants to ask her to find out the origin of the artifact. Encouraged by her adoptive father Ruslan, Sherry accepts the task. Iris sends a newly formed Crimson Knight to protect Sherry, and Alexia also joins the investigation against the kidnappers. A new crisis is coming. After school, Shadow is dragged by two classmates to go shopping, and happens to see a store launch a new product named chocolate. Shadow did not expect that there would be chocolate in this world, so he wants to buy some to taste, but the store has been viral, and there is a long queue. Just then, Nu, a staff at the store, approaches Shadow and invites him to participate in a questionnaire alone. Soon Shadow senses that something is wrong. Nu is not as enthusiastic as just now, ignoring him the whole time. Led by Nu, Shadow sees a group of respectful waitresses, as well as Gamma, an old acquaintance of Shadow. Only then does Shadow realize that the store is run by Shadow 7. Many years ago, Shadow told Gamma something about his past life, including how to make chocolate and various snacks. Gamma is intelligent and manages to make the chocolate. She also founded a big department store with her excellent business talents. Shadow is delighted to sit on the throne that Gamma prepares for him, with more than a dozen beautiful girls kneeling in front of him. At this moment, Shadow is like an emperor with a luxurious harem. Then, Gamma brings more good news to Shadow. She launched a home delivery shopping service for orders above 9.9 according to the sales method that Shadow talked about. Now her business has spread in and outside of the kingdom, earning an amazing fortune of up to 1,200,000,000 for Shadow. Gamma worships Shadow blindly, and even an ordinary act of Shadow will be interpreted by her as a wise one. For example, Shadow just comes to buy chocolate this time, but Gamma thinks he's here to investigate the imposters disguised as Shadow Garden. She then sends Nude to help Shadow investigate it. Until now, Shadow realizes someone has been impersonating them. Since Shadow has spent too much time with Gamma, he and his two classmates are about to miss curfew. While running hard, Shadow hears a fight. He suspects the imposters may show up, so he makes a huge sacrifice to lie to his classmates that he can't hold back anymore and needs to relieve himself in the alley. At Shadow's urging, the two classmates decide to rush back to school first. They vow to keep Shadow's pooping on the street secret. At this moment, they seem like in the tragedy of being separated by death. After that, Shadow changes into his disguise. In the high air, he sees Alexia fighting the mysterious imposter. When Alexia just knocks down one, more reinforcements are coming. At the critical moment of Alexia under siege and being about to die, Shadow shows up and scares off the imposters with his super strength. Alexia is so badly injured that she faints before she can ask Shadow's identity and purpose. Shadow then catches up with the imposters and kills them, leaving only one living man for Nude to interrogate. The imposter sneaks up on the seemingly weak Nude, but he doesn't expect to be defeated by her in one move. Soon after, the headquarters of the imposters get informed of their missing. A battle is about to start. When Alexia reports her latest findings, Iris learns that someone is impersonating the Shadow Garden to kill people. Iris tells Alexia that she will eliminate all forces that undermine the stability of the kingdom, including Shadow Garden and the Diablos cult. Unlike the princesses who have been worried about the kingdom, Shadow's classmates only worry that they will remain single until graduation. They give the chocolate they bought yesterday to the girls they like, only to get beaten up by one girl's fiancé and treated as a pervert by the other. In order to disguise himself as an ordinary person like his two classmates, Shadow casually gives his chocolate to the first girl he meets, but he doesn't expect that this girl is Sherry, the girl he has met once before. When Ruslan learns his daughter has received chocolate, he tells Sherry that it means love at first sight. Sherry has never been in love, so she feels shy about this topic. Just then, Ruslan suddenly begins to cough, and it is revealed from their conversation that Ruslan seems to have a severe illness. After Ruslan leaves, Sherry begins to stare at the chocolate, unable to focus on researching the relic. She is thinking about how to respond to Shadow. At this moment, Shadow does not know that he is being targeted by Sherry. Nu has stolen a school uniform to infiltrate the school and is reporting to him. She interrogated the person who impersonated the Shadow Garden, but unfortunately, the imposter was brainwashed. Nu tells Shadow the cult of Diablos loves to brainwash its members, and that the imposters were probably to lure out the Shadow Garden. Recently, the Shadow Garden has just tracked down Rex, a named first child of the cult, who was secretly taking action in the royal capital. Shadow still feels that the cult of Diablos is just made up by himself, so he does not listen carefully to Nu's intelligence the whole time. Not long ago, two of Shadow's classmates helped him sign up for the school tournament, which makes Shadow a little excited, and he has begun to think about how to perfectly play ordinary in the game. Nu looks at the calm Shadow, recalling that Shadow 7 once said that Shadow can always think of battle plans quietly. She misunderstands that Shadow has already thought of a way to deal with the cult of Diablos, which makes her admire Shadow even more. As the tournament begins, Shadow's sister Claire starts her winning streak, and everyone is discussing who is stronger between Claire and the student council president Rose. Coincidentally, Rose happens to duel with Shadow, who is very satisfied with his opponent, and he has prepared the perfect disguise plan. Rose's movements are as slow as turtles in Shadow's eyes. He throws a bag of plasma into his mouth and then fakes himself being beaten and vomiting blood. When the referee is announcing Rose as the winner, Shadow begins to play a weak man with a strong desire to win. He pretends to struggle to fight Rose again, and to get knocked out. The drama king acts to get up again and again after being knocked to the ground. In the end, the referee can't stand it and forcibly announces that Rose has won. Looking at Shadow, who still wants to continue fighting, Rose is getting attracted to this stubborn boy. Depressed, Shadow deliberately wraps several layers of bandages on his head to look like an injured person, and that's when Sherry finds him. Sherry gives Shadow the cookie she made as a gift in return, offering to start with friends, which means to get along slowly, and then go further into lovers. The funny thing is that Shadow doesn't remember giving her chocolate, and he doesn't understand why Sherry comes to him. Just then, the vice principal Ruslan shows up. He has been secretly observing the crush of his adopted daughter. Shadow has investigated the great figures of the kingdom, so he knows the man in front of him is a master of both scholastic and martial arts. In order to play the role of an ordinary student, Shadow does not want to be involved with the daughter of the big man, so he decides to distance himself from Sherry as much as possible. But the reality is going in the opposite direction. Sherry can't help missing Shadow when she returns to the dormitory. Just then, the figure of Shadow's gossip girlfriend Alexia flashes through her mind. Meanwhile, Alexia is drinking a new popular drink, coffee, and she likes unsweetened black coffee the most. Just then, Sherry suddenly comes to her door. The two girls have very different preferences for coffee. Sherry likes to add a lot of sugar to coffee, but their preferences for boys are very similar. Sherry asks Alexia if the gossip between her and Shadow is true. Alexia explains that they are just pretending to date, which makes Sherry very happy. Alexia then realizes that Sherry also likes Shadow, and the proud Princess Alexia feels jealous for the first time in her life. Shadow doesn't know that he has become a rage among many girls. His classmates are gossiping every day, while Shadow has no intention of joining the discussion at all. The only thing he cares about is when he can play dumb again. Soon the opportunity comes to Shadow when Rose presides over an election meeting for student council officials. On this day, the cult of Diablos launches an attack on the school, and a red light mask completely envelopes the school. Shadow is the first to realize that he can't use magic, and then several attackers rush into the classroom. Rose, being unable to use magic, is no match for them at all. At the critical moment, Shadow blocks the fatal blow for Ross. The drama king starts his show again. Rose mistakes that Shadow likes her, or he wouldn't fend off the attack at the risk of death. Shadow closes his eyes and his heart seems to stop beating, recalling their brief acquaintance. Rose can't help but cry. Members of the cult of Diablos then begin to force the students to gather. Just when they leave, Shadow wakes up. Sure enough, the scriptwriter won't allow the protagonists to die, who may be more important than his biological kids after all. Shadow used his magic to play dead and deceived everyone, while most of the students and teachers are unable to control magic precisely as they are trapped in the anti-magic barrier. But Shadow is an exception, because he can break down mana into smaller units and use it freely, just like small fish can pass through the grid of a fishing net. Shadow comes to the rooftop because he can have the best view of the school from above. The situation of invaders, knights, and hostages is all under his surveillance. The anti-magic barrier is too terrifying, so Iris and the knights do not dare to venture in. Therefore, Shadow has to deal with all the invaders alone. Shadow is very excited. Though there were various games in his previous world, they are all virtual after all. The immersive battle now that may cause death is what excites Shadow, who soon starts his hunt. Meanwhile, the members of the cult also take action. The elite of the cult Rex, mentioned by Nu not long ago, wants to kill Sherry and snatch the mysterious artifact from her. Fortunately, two high-ranking knights arrive in time, who took the orders of Princess Iris to protect Sherry. These two knights are stronger than the regular students and teachers in the academy, and they buy Sherry some valuable time to flee. However, Sherry is so clumsy that she attracts the attention of the cult several times. Fortunately, Shadow also notices Sherry, and every time the cult discovers Sherry, Shadow will secretly kill them. The slow girl Sherry thinks she has never been discovered. Now she is going to her adoptive father Ruslan's room to look up the documents and investigate the anti-magic barrier. The funny thing is that though Shadow helps Sherry solve the cult members along the way, the careless girl still falls down when not being chased. Shadow can only show up to catch her. The first thing he says to Sherry is to take off the slippers that make noises. Under the protection of Shadow, Sherry successfully traces the origin of the barrier. There is an ancient artifact called the Eye of Avarice, which has the capacity of absorbing the magic of the nearby people. The Eye of Avarice can also remember each person's mana characteristics, so those intruders can use mana normally. Sherry also discovers that once the Eye of Avarice absorbs too much mana, it will release all at once, and the entire school will be completely destroyed. The only thing that can deal with the Eye of Avarice now is the artifact in Sherry's hand. But there are still two problems. One is that Sherry still needs some materials to make the artifact effective, and the other is they haven't figured out a way to get close to the Eye of Avarice. Shadow sets out to help Sherry find materials, while the arrogant Rex does not know that he is about to encounter a strong enemy. Shadow. Rex is reporting to a mysterious man that several high-ranking warriors have been killed. The mysterious man in strange armor immediately realizes that the murderer must be from the Shadow Garden. He then arranges for Rex to take 4 assistants to catch the lurker. Rex is casual at first, but when 4 of his companions are killed in an instant, he finally begins to panic. Shadow is so fast that Rex can't see his face, but is beaten the whole time. He retreats to a classroom, where he is horrified to find that there are full of the corpses of his companions. Just then, Shadow attacks him from behind. After dealing with Rex, Shadow goes to Sherry's room to collect materials, where he happens to meet Nude, who then reports to Shadow that the kingdom's reinforcements have a dispute over the command, and most members of the Shadow 7 are now absent from the royal capital. Shadow is very calm after listening to it, and dealing with a huge organization alone makes him enjoy it even more. Shadow details his plan for the battle, which raises Nude's admiration for Shadow to another level. She does not know that Shadow's intelligence about the Eye of Avarice comes from Sherry's research. As the atmosphere in the academy is getting tense, a fierce war is about to break out. Shadow brings Sherry the materials she needs, and Sherry finally creates a special device that can restrain the Eye of Avarice. The girl comes to the hall through a secret passage, and she throws the device hard at the leader of the intruders. In an instant, the red light that enveloped the school disappears, and the students, finding some of their magic power recovered, immediately rise up to resist. At this moment, Shadow finds the leader of the intruder, whom he recognizes as the adoptive father Ruslan of Sherry, based on the way he walks. Believing that he can easily kill Shadow, Ruslan removes his disguise and reveals his perfect plan with a show-off mentality. When he was young, Ruslan was a master swordsman, but later he suffered from a strange disease that dropped his strength significantly. Ruslan discovered that the Eye of Avarice may cure his disease, so he approached Sherry's mother in the hope that the scholar would help crack the eye. However, Sherry's mother rejected Ruslan because she thought the eye was too dangerous. Then, Ruslan brutally killed her. The vicious man also pretended to be kind and adopted Sherry, and since then Ruslan has used this adopted daughter to continue the study of the eye. Shadow dresses as the leader of Shadow Garden, preparing to kill the scum. Ruslan, who then senses the power of the enemy and immediately activates the eye. Ruslan has discovered that the device that controls the Eye of Avarice can emit stronger power, but Sherry doesn't know that. That's why Ruslan could use Sherry to help him research the relic. At this moment, Ruslan has the same great power as when he was young, but he is not provoking an ordinary swordsman. Shadow kills Ruslan brutally, just like how Ruslan killed Sherry's mother. It is tit for tat. As Shadow is about to leave, he encounters Sherry, who is so saddened by her adoptive father's death that she doesn't recognize Shadow Garden's leader as Shadow. Worried that Sherry would be more grieved to know her adoptive father was a bad person, Shadow leaves without saying anything. After the incident, Sherry decides to study in another city. Shadow is also about to leave the city. Alpha writes to inform her companions to assemble at the sacred city, where she discovered important information. Here I'm gonna focus on Epsilon from Shadow 7, who is very dissatisfied with her figure. Therefore, she often uses slimes that can change shape to disguise her plump pectorals, and she is ready to seduce Shadow with her disguised sexy body. All girls in Shadow 7 are very obsessed with Shadow, which causes them to be jealous of each other. Beta notices that Epsilon is using slime to disguise her figure and immediately throws back her shoulders to show her F-cup. They decide to go to the sacred city to compete with each other. Coincidentally, Princess Alexia, who coincides with their destination, is about to go to the city for a big event. Alexia drags Iris to Gamma's department store to shop before departure, where the sexy lingerie shocks Iris, who is very conservative and adamantly disapproves of her sister wearing it. But Alexia doesn't listen to her sister's advice at all, and she is very confident in her figure. Speechless, Iris suspects that her sister is in love. Actually, the student council president Rose is the one in love. When Shadow blocked an attack for her, Rose mistakenly thought Shadow liked her, and since then, she has followed Shadow wherever he goes. Shadow runs into Rose on his way to the sacred city, and Rose surely follows him as she would even go to the restroom with Shadow. Meanwhile, Shadow is thinking women will only impede his fighting efficiency, but Shadow worries that if he tells the truth, he will be hacked to death by Rose. After all, once a woman is angry, she is 10,000 times more terrifying than the Demon King. After arriving at the sacred city, Rose drags Shadow to a cartoonist's book signing session, where Shadow is shocked to see the cartoonist's works, a series of popular manga on Earth, such as Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Demon Slayer, and so on. Shadow suspects that there are other transmigrationers in this world, and when he takes the manga to meet the author, he sees an acquaintance. The author turns out to be Beta from Shadow 7. Beta has always liked literature, and Shadow once talked to her about the manga he had read on Earth, but he didn't expect the girl would copy them. Shadow has to abandon the speculation that there are other transmigrationers. Right now, he is in a hot spring to expel the fatigue after a long journey. This is a mixed hot spring where Shadow meets Alexia. The princess is very confident in her figure and has been putting on various poses to seduce Shadow. Nonetheless, Shadow doesn't even open his eyes, and in turn teases Alexia, questioning if she is obsessed with his big thing. Alexia is shocked by Shadow's cheekiness. Soon the largest church is hosting a big event in the sacred city, where each registered fighter will summon a hero's soul that defeated the Demon King Diablos while alive. The stronger the fighter is, the stronger soul he can summon. While attending the event as a guest, Alexia is struck by the huge pectorals of Beta. In terms of the body figure, the proud princess has completely lost to Beta. Alexia vows to exercise her pectoralis muscles when she returns, and then an accident happens. Rose secretly signed up for Shadow, who is worried about exposing his real strength once he summons the strongest hero. Hence, he secretly transforms into the leader of Shadow Garden to sabotage the event. To everyone's surprise, Shadow summons the Calamity Witch Aurora, who is rumored to be as terrifying as Diablos. Even such a strong opponent loses to Shadow while he hasn't exposed his full strength. After Aurora's defeat, a portal suddenly appears, sucking Shadow in. At this moment, Alpha shows up with the members of Shadow Garden, who capture some of the church leaders, and Beta, who is disguised as a famous cartoonist. They then enter the portal. Alexia and Rose, eager to know what is going on, follow them. But Alexia happens to fall on Beta when she teleports, and she accidentally touches Beta's pectoralis muscle, which makes Alexia feel very frustrated again. Alpha doesn't make trouble for Alexia and Rose because she has more important tasks during this trip. According to the ancient documents she found, this place is called Sanctuary, where the left hand of the Demon King Diablos is sealed. The next words of Alpha surprise everyone. The hero who defeated Diablos, Olivier, was actually the ancestor of Alpha, and she knows the secrets of the cult of Diablos. Alpha then destroys the sanctuary's magical core, allowing Olivier's sealed memory to reappear. The Diablos cult obtained some of the Demon King's cells, which they tried to use to increase human power, but most of the experiments failed, and Olivier was a rare survivor at the time. The cult drove Olivier to cut off Diablo's left arm, but their real goal was to crack Diablo's amazing regenerative abilities. By researching Diablo's left arm, the cult developed a drug that could help them obtain eternal life. There were two flaws in the drug. It must be taken once a year to maintain the effect, and it could be produced only 12 beads per year. Eventually, only the 12 knights of round of the cult were eligible to take the drug. One of the church leaders, Nelson, has other identity as the Knight of Round, who have been continuously researching to overcome the drug deficiencies. And one reason why Shadow 7 became monsters when they were little is that they are descendants of heroes, while the other is they were about to be the follow-up experiments of the cult. The exposed Nelson controls the enchantment of Sanctuary and randomly teleports the people around Alpha, leaving only the Orc Delta in Shadow 7 by Alpha's side. Nelson is very confident in facing them, as the closer he gets to Sanctuary Center, the stronger his power is, while Alpha and the others will be sucked away from their magic and lose their combat power. In an instant, Nelson splits into countless copies of himself ready to kill his opponents. However, the Knight of Round didn't expect that Delta alone could kill all of his doppelgangers without Alpha even making a move. Epsilon, who though was teleported, is confident in the strength of her companions, and instead of going to support Alpha, she has been consulting ancient documents with others. When their magic power is sucked away by Sanctuary, the slime equipment on them is affected. Hence, the others see the slime that Epsilon used to disguise the pectoralis muscles, but they just pretend they didn't see it, for fear that Epsilon would kill them. After gathering the information they need, they quickly leave the center to join Alpha. Meanwhile, Nelson, seeing that his opponent is getting stronger, releases the sealed Olivier for a decisive battle. But Alpha has already got the information she needs, so she does not intend to continue the battle at all, directly leaving with her companions. Nelson, fearing the strength of Alpha and her companions, does not dare to chase after them. Just then, Sanctuary is alerting that someone has broken into the central area, and the one turns out to be Shadow, along with the Calamity Witch Aurora, who is only part of the soul and does not have a complete memory. She was sealed by the Diablos cult in Sanctuary for research, and when Shadow met this poor woman, he decided to help her regain her freedom. Now, the biggest problem for Shadow is the Olivier brought by Nelson. In Aurora's mutilated memories, Olivier is quite strong. She tells Shadow that they can't defeat this formidable enemy, but Shadow's power far exceeds her expectation, and he eliminates Olivier with just a few injuries. At this moment, Nelson summons countless Olivier's copies. No one could imagine that he has so many copies of ancient heroes. If it's someone else facing the situation, he would be shocked and scared. But for Shadow, this level of opponent only cheers him up a little. In the face of absolute strength, all trickery is meaningless. Shadow condenses magic power to break through the enchantment, and destroys the entire sanctuary with a sword while killing replicas. Only Aurora is left by Shadow's side, but soon the mutilated soul will dissipate. In fact, she knew from the beginning that she would disappear once leaving Sanctuary, but she wanted to do it anyway, before disappearing completely. Aurora asks Shadow to find her main body to complete a secret commission. The event this time shocks Alexia, who can no longer estimate how strong Alpha and her companions are. Then, she teams up with Beta and Rose to investigate the shared intelligence from Shadow Garden. I wonder how Alexia will feel if she knows Beta is a member of Shadow 7. After that, Alexia goes to meet with her sister Iris, as the churches on the mainland are seriously infiltrated by the undercover agents of the Diablos cult, and Shadow Garden has not taken a stand yet. Alexia suggests that Iris must find out the conspiracy behind these forces. Unfortunately, Alexia will never find out the truth, because Shadow, who dominates Shadow Garden, is too difficult to see through. He recently has the idea of fabricating a non-existent identity to participate in the Bushin Festival tournament organized by the church. Shadow intends to create a weak face with soft slime, and then defeats his opponent again and again to advance, so that the audience's mental activity will range from looking down on him to being very surprised in the end. The day before the competition, Shadow packs a lot of food at McDonald's. Shadow 7 has developed a lot of food and goods on Earth based on what Shadow saw in his past life. When Shadow was about to go home for a big meal, he bumps into Rose on the way. From their conversation, it's revealed that Rose's country pursues art rather than force, and Rose practices martial arts against the king's order because she was saved by a mysterious person when she was a child. And since then, she has longed for the power to protect others. But Rose doesn't know the mysterious person was actually Shadow. Soon the tournament begins, but two accidents occur. One is that Shadow's disguised low-level fighter keeps winning, making the audience completely unbelievable. The other accident is related to Rose, who absconds after stabbing her fiancé. Alexia comes to Beta. She pulls her by the collar and asks her to investigate what happened to Rose. Beta reluctantly agrees while tidying up her clothes, looking like she doesn't want to get involved in the trouble. In fact, Shadow Garden has been keeping an eye on Rose, and Alexia receives Rose's movement just after leaving Beta. During the time of Rose's disappearance, the tournament continues. When Shadow is watching the game, he encounters a mysterious woman named Beatrix who is looking for her missing niece. Shadow finds that she looks exactly like Alpha, and the combat power she inadvertently displayed is quite strong. Right now, Shadow is in a hurry to disguise himself to join the competition, and thus does not have much entanglement with Beatrix. After Shadow changes his look, he encounters his opponent, a man named Goldie with decent strength. Since every time he meets a strong enemy, Goldie will actively abstain. He has never lost to others through battles, nicknamed the Myth of Undefeated. Golden shows his strongest trick, trying to win both the competition and the worship of others. Just then, Shadow sneezes, causing the weapon to poke Goldie and thus defeats him. Shadow once again disguises his victory as an accident. Meanwhile, covered in injuries, Rose is unable to hold on. As she recalls, the truth finally becomes clear. Not long ago, Rose went to see her father, but to find her fiancé Perv took control of the old king. Rose decisively attacked Perv, only to be framed by Perv and his accomplices. While Rose is wanted, she also faces another tricky problem. Like Alpha, Rose is also a descendant of heroes, and she has been hovering out of control at any time after being injured. That's when Rose meets someone who changes her life. Shadow, dressing up as the leader of Shadow Garden, helps her back to her senses, for which Rose is so grateful that she decides to continue her unfinished mission. After Shadow saves Rose, he changes into a low-profile form to participate in the competition. His opponent this time, and Rose, is quite strong. She has been observing Shadow's matches and found that Shadow seemed to gain his victories by accidents. But in fact, Shadow also had some very hidden attacks, which were too fast for ordinary people to detect. And Rose knows that Shadow is not easy to deal with, so she uses her strongest tricks right away. However, the gap in strength between them is too big, and Shadow creates another accident to easily defeat her. Perv, who is watching the battle, gets very concerned about this and immediately orders to investigate this mysterious contestant. When Anne Rose is getting treated after the competition, she offers generous deal to invite Shadow to join her home country because she admires him very much. However, Shadow has his powerful Shadow Empire, so the temptations offered by Anne Rose fail to impress him. Soon comes the day of the final of the tournament, during when Perv intends to control the king to assassinate Iris's father, and thus provokes a war between the two countries to seize power while the chaos is in place. However, there are many variables in his plan, the first of which is that Iris invites Beatrix as an audience. Perv has heard of this woman, who is nicknamed Martial Goddess and is stronger than Iris. Therefore, Perv kind of fears Beatrix. Another variable is Shadow, who disguises himself as a passerby all the way to the finals. During the duel, Princess Iris has been warning herself. It seems no matter what defensive posture she poses, she always has the illusion that she will be killed. Iris has always been proud, and she can't accept that she will throw in the towel before she fights, so the princess shows her strongest blow, but to get her neck grabbed by the opponent easily. Hence, the winner has been decided in one round. Nobody can estimate how powerful Shadow is, and Perv missed this variable to cause the plan to fail. Just then, Rose appears in the audience. She can't bear to see her father become a puppet controlled by Perv, and finally ends the life of her loved one with her own hands. After that, she is ready to kill herself to follow her father. At this moment, Shadow rushes over in the form of the leader of Shadow Garden. Such close encounter reminds Rose of a past. She was once kidnapped when she was a child. Fortunately, a mysterious person came to her rescue. Rose senses a familiar feeling in the head of Shadow Garden, and she is sure that he is the mysterious person back then. Encouraged by Shadow, Rose perks up, but then Beatrix suddenly attacks Shadow. Soon, Iris joins the battle to fight Shadow, using an ancient weapon to increase her strength. Beatrix initiates the battle because of her admiration for the strong, while Iris is trying to eliminate Shadow, the hidden danger for the kingdom. However, they underestimate Shadow's strength. Even though the female warriors are already very powerful, they still fall into a disadvantage when Shadow takes them a little seriously. Iris and Beatrix have the best battle of their lives, but still lose to Shadow. Unreconciled, Iris warns Shadow that the knights of the kingdom are rushing here, and she intends to consume Shadow's energy with the superiority in numbers. Undeterred at all by the warning, Shadow unleashes a huge circle of purple light that envelopes the city. By demonstrating his strength, Shadow tells Iris that if he wants the entire city, everyone will be killed in a second. Shadow is gone when the harsh light dissipates. Iris and Beatrix are never his end, as he is always on his way to finding a stronger enemy. After this day, Shadow 7 are still active everywhere in the continent. Some are doing business to earn funds for the organization, while others are engaged in intelligence work. Rose also officially joined Shadow Garden at Alpha's invitation. On her first training, her clothes are completely shattered under the attack of the instructor. Maybe she is saying goodbye to everything in the past. That brings the end of first season of The Eminence in Shadow. After transmigrating into the other world, the Earth Boy Shadow not only became an invincible existence, but also gained countless wives and admirers. Based on the current trend, the screenwriter will definitely expand the harem for him in the second season. This anime contains power struggles, exciting battles, and a rather tempting harem plot. I can't wait to see the second season. If you are the same, just subscribe to my channel. There are more anime recaps on my channel that may help you kill your boring. In